Russian media citing Iranian and Pakistani sources reports that the US and Iran have agreed on a ceasefire that could be announced in the coming days and would allow free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. For more on this news, we are now joined by our correspondent Yusef Jalali, who's reporting us from Tehran. Yusef, thanks for joining us. Yusef, how credible is the Russian media report that the US and Iran have already agreed on a ceasefire? And has Tehran received any official confirmation of this claim?
Of course, such a claim by RIA Novosti, the Russian news agency, should now be treated, at least at this stage, as unverified because so far we've not heard anything coming from the Iranian official institutions like the Foreign Ministry or the National Security Council. But of course, that report by RIA Novosti states or cites anonymous Pakistani military sources, and of course, Iranian security sources, suggesting and claiming that the United States and Iran had agreed on a ceasefire that include free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. The agency also said that in the coming days, talks will resume and any agreement would be announced in the coming days. But of course, Iran's position remains one of resistance against any U.S. pressure. Now, the Iranian officials are saying that any agreement or any return to talks and negotiations with the United States is contingent upon the United States meeting Iran's core demands, and that is the lifting of the sanctions, the oil-related sanctions, unfreezing its assets, and of course, acknowledging and recognizing Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. As long as these demands are not met in the eyes of Tehran, then Iran would continue to restrict commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, what is the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz, and is there any indication that Iran would allow unrestricted navigation if a ceasefire agreement is reached?
Of course, this choke point remains heavily restricted. And of course, commercial traffic is far below pre-crisis levels. And that is because Iran has, of course, made it clear that it continues to put pressure and limit traffic through the Strait of Hormuz as long as its core demands are not met by the United States. But of course, we do know that Iran and Oman did hold talks. We had Badr al-Busaidi, the Omani foreign minister, who visited Iran. And of course, he visited Iran on Tuesday and held talks with his Iranian counterpart, Abbas Araghchi. The two sides then released a joint statement on the arrangements of the Strait of Hormuz, the shipment, the commercial traffic through this waterway, and of course, joint arrangement for mine clearance through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is very much significant because Iran and Oman are the coastal states on this strategic Strait of Hormuz. And these are the countries that have been in constant contact with each other, trying to reopen shipment and traffic through this strategic waterway. And of course, Iran and Oman hoped that in the coming days, very significant and serious efforts would be put in place by both sides to reopen traffic. But of course, we're not expecting traffic to return to pre-crisis levels because Iran views this as a major card for any kind of return to diplomacy with the United States. Iran is basically controlling this Strait of Hormuz as a strategic card to try to set its own terms in any potential talks with the United States. Iran is basically saying that it continues to put pressure on traffic through the strategic Strait of Hormuz as long as the United States is not lifting the sanctions on Iran. And in the eyes of Tehran, the United States is not showing any willingness to return to diplomacy because we see that, for example, the Treasury Department of the U.S. has instated and put in place new wave of sanctions targeting major Iranian officials. And of course, the export of Iran's oil to its partners like to China. So these measures, these economic measures, are viewed by Tehran as a signal that the United States is now ready to re-engage in negotiations. And as long as this signal is being received by Tehran, then Tehran will continue to limit traffic and shipment through the Strait of Hormuz.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. But before going, would you tell us that it's a beginning of a ceasefire, really? Or would you say that it's just diplomacy time out before the next phase of escalation?
Well, of course, Iran has been very much clear in its positions regarding any kind of potential ceasefire with the United States. Iran has said that and has put forth its conditions, and those conditions include the lifting of the naval blockade on its ports, because we know that the United States has tightened the siege on Iranian ports, trying to limit the import and export through the Iranian southern ports located along the Sea of Oman, and of course the Strait of Hormuz itself and the Persian Gulf. So these ports are being blockaded by the United States, and Iran is saying that the United States and the Americans have to lift this ongoing naval blockade before any talks could resume between the two sides. And of course, they're saying that the United States has to unfreeze its foreign assets, the Iranian foreign assets, and of course, to remove any kind of sanctions on Iran. This is a sign of goodwill regarded by the Iranians.
All right.
So if the United States goes ahead and does this.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, for joining us.